Okay, so after you finish your cooperative activity, another idea that's important to have is to have a time for reflection. And this is when the students can tell you what they liked, what they didn't like, so you can fix it for next time. If the first time you try an activity, if it does not go so well, that's okay. That just means the students are getting used to it. Maybe it's a new way to learn in class, and they need to get used to the whole being on their feet, moving around the room. So practice, 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 and it will get better over time. So I would need to ask you, I want to reflect, what did you like about the carousel? About this activity? Let's do positive first. It's interesting how?
Interesting because we can use a different opinion to look at the question and find the answer.
Good. Okay. What else did you like about this?
We can cooperate with others and we can listen to their different opinions.
So think about why you might like this activity instead of just immediately answering questions after you read an article. Let's imagine we always did this before we answered questions. How is that better? Or how is it worse? Maybe something you did not like, that you did not like about the carousel.
I think the kids will like it because they can walk around and to talk and discuss with the others and share ideas with their partners.
And even though we were walking around, it still had to be, there were still rules. So there's still a time limit. They still have to listen for my directions, and they need to practice that. So even though it's noisy.
There's still order though, because there is a structure. It's not just paper and draw whatever you want. It's very orderly. A lot of rules.
So what are other ways you can use this in your classroom? So I put questions about the article on the posters. What are other ways you can use the carousel? I know we need some time to think first.
The ideas, how do they learn new words?
So this was questions about an article, but maybe we can do questions about something else.
I think we can use this to let students to find the key information from the article. For example, we can put W and what, why, how in each of the poster and ask them to ask questions. For example, in why poster, you have to make questions.
Using
why, yes. So this is my opinion.
The other thing I was saying is if you teach vocabulary, you can certainly put your vocabulary words on each poster, and then they can have one group has to define the word, or maybe one has to draw a picture or an illustration, or maybe someone else has to give an example. Maybe another group has to write the word in a sentence. You see? So they could all have that opportunity to do something like that.
I actually use the carousel mostly with vocabulary. Sometimes I'll do questions. I mostly do vocabulary, just the word on top. And they have to reinvent the definition. Like, how did you feel by the time you got to the poster and you were the last group at the poster? What was the challenge? You have to think differently. you really have to start using your higher order thinking outside of the box and being more creative. And that's really, I think, when their brains turn on and they start to connect these ideas together more, because they really have to think harder about what is the relationship, or how else can I represent that idea?
And the other advantage is they've now read 4 different views of the same topic or same subject. And so then maybe they've learned more. And maybe the visual person said, oh, I see a map now on how they all connect, or I see all the words that are tied to it, or I can see an illustration. So, and it allows them to express it in different ways and to process it in different ways too.
And so how can you use these posters as an assessment? Bringing back the idea of assessment, how can we use the carousel for assessment? Remember yesterday we asked a question, why do we assess? And we said, so that we can see what the students know. Do I see what my students know? Yeah. So maybe I don't give them a grade for that, but what I do in my class, when they finish the vocabulary carousel, and I think I showed this to you already, right? So they travel to the different posters, and I think I have 10. So there were 10 posters in the room, and they worked in smaller groups. And when they finished the carousel, I gave them this worksheet. They traveled to the posters again, and they chose the 2 ideas that they liked the most, and they had to draw a picture. I always make them draw a picture, so they chose the ideas that they liked the most. And I gave them a grade for that. That was their official assessment. That's the informal, and that's the formal. And the formal assessment for this lab, this activity today, oh, well, let me just review. So cooperative learning is successful when you have roles and a reflection. So I gave you the roles. I told everybody in the group has a job or a role, and then we reflect at the end. So they really have to think about, how did that help them learn? How did this activity help me learn, and how can I make it better next time? And I think the more students know about how they learn, they can be in more control the next time. Okay, so we're not going to do this, but this is where you can have the students work in groups or individually, and they would have to answer the questions on pages 4 and 5. And you can see these questions reflect the questions from the carousel. Okay? And maybe this is what I give my students an assessment for. So again, this is the beginning of the year. So I don't know if I use as much individual work, but I think that if they did a good job on the carousel, if I see that they did a good job, then I can ask them to work by themselves. So that's how I'm assessing what they know again, and I make a decision on the spot. Okay, groups or in pairs or maybe by themselves. And they have to answer these questions. And I think the only difficult part for me would be the pie chart. If no one made a pie chart, this circle graph, or what do you call it, pie chart? Yeah. Then I know that I need to take time to review that with my students, and we need to do this as a group, because this is difficult. A lot of my students don't have good math skills, so I need to teach them this before I give it to them. But this is an idea of a way to assess them. Okay, and this is our exit ticket for today. Remember, you have that warm-up exit ticket paper. I want you to use the words atmosphere and gas in one sentence. Okay, in the same sentence, atmosphere and gas. Remember, those were 2 of our vocabulary words. So if you need help writing your sentence, you can say the atmosphere is, and maybe that can be a good way to start your sentence. You don't have to use that. That's just an idea of how to start your sentence. So I just gave you a copy of the PowerPoint, and I think most of the slides are the same. I maybe changed a little things, but the important ones are on the slides here. And I call this my exit ticket. And I don't use it every day, but maybe the students have to write an exit ticket on a Post-it, and maybe they have to stick it on the door before they leave. They can't exit unless they have a ticket. So it's an exit ticket. and I can use this, again, as another way to assess the students. Can they use the words atmosphere and gas in one sentence? Maybe not. And then I know tomorrow or the next time I see them, I need to review some more before I continue. And I don't have enough for everyone, but if anyone was interested, these are the, what I call e-cart. It's on an online assessment with the test questions, and it's multiple choice. And these are 5 questions that I can use with the students. I don't have to, it's optional. But these are very similar to the state exam in science that my 8th graders have to take. So I practice these all year with my students so they know what the test questions look like and we know how to answer them. But these 5 questions are the questions I would give my students after we finish this lab. So I'm going to leave those here for after we're finished. Just so you know, and the rest of the lab, on page 6, in the same lab, my students would have to complete an atmosphere foldable. So they have written directions here. Students refer to Sciencesaurus textbook for information. So this is when I would use a book. But it's really only, I think, when it says Sciencesaurus, pages 214 and 215. It's just 2 pages in a book where they look for information about the atmosphere, and they would complete a foldable. And it's called a foldable because there's many layers. So they would cut out the circles, and each circle represents a layer of the atmosphere. They would glue them on top of each other so the circles get smaller. I'm sorry, I wanted to bring a student example, but I forgot. And then they cut out the pictures, and they paste the picture in the correct layer of the atmosphere. They also use these words, middle, coldest, outside weather, hottest, and they put the adjective in the correct layer of the atmosphere. And they also have to label it. You can see they have to label it. They have to tell me the distance from the Earth. The location of the ozone layer has to be purple. And then they have a rubric here. And this is the rubric I use. It's on the bottom of page 6. I borrowed this from another teacher. Another teacher made this and put it on the blog, and I copied it. And this is how the student can do a self-assessment. Did they complete all of these steps? And I give the grade on the right side. So that's how they know in advance how they're going to get the points for the foldable. And then on page, this is a long lab. This is one of the longest, I think, in my curriculum. This will take me at least a week, maybe 2, to finish with my classes. Page 9 and page 10 are more about the atmosphere, and on page 10 you can see that they're studying root words. They can see that sphere is in all of the vocabulary words, and we just study that sphere means circle, and each one represents a different layer of the atmosphere. This is another idea for an assessment. I found it on the blog, but I didn't use it with my students. I think she used it as a warm-up. So some people do use matching, and they have all of the vocabulary words. Maybe they talk about pollution. And that's when students, when they finish this whole lab, that's when I would give them the online exam. So another idea for assessment, maybe I want to ask my students to write a summary about the atmosphere. Maybe they write sentences using vocabulary words like my exit ticket. Or I can do an open-ended quiz. I do a lot of those where I ask the students questions. It's not multiple choice though, it's a lot of fill in the blank. And with the open-ended quiz, I always let my students use their notes. I always let them see the lab when they take the quiz. So just to wrap up, the strategies I used here were a warm-up. I activated background knowledge, so we had our warm-up question about the mountain climber, and we talked about what we thought was in the bag. pre-taught vocabulary. I didn't use it with you, but you can do a worksheet to have them find the definitions to words. We modeled how to read and highlight. We had paired reading, and then we had an exit ticket. We also practiced think, pair, share, and carousel activities for cooperative learning. And just to point out, so I remember some of the teachers in the other workshop, they said, my students won't understand this article about the atmosphere. It's very difficult. They don't know the word nitrogen. That's okay. Maybe they don't know, but after the carousel, after you study the words, you do all of these activities, I don't expect them to know nitrogen until we finish this lesson. I mean, it might be difficult. So maybe I read about it, but I don't know what I'm reading. But then I do the carousel and I hear ideas from other students and I see these ideas in a different way. This is just one way to learn about the atmosphere, is reading about it. Then we do something with it. Then we make a foldable, we make the activity. So it's involving them in the whole process. Okay. So any feedback on the lesson? We have one more thing we need to do after this. I think we're going to finish early today, so that's good. But anything you liked or any other ideas or questions that you have, this is exactly what I do I think the second week of school. This is my first lesson with the students. So do you have any feedback, questions, or comments, or anything?
Four in a group, four in a group is the best choice in carousel because in our class we often have about 36 to 38 students in our class. If we divide students in 4 people in one group, they may be too many groups in. So
I did this activity with 60 teachers on Monday. I was a little scared. It was a little crazy because it was the first time for everybody. What I did was I had 4 green posters, 4 pink. So I repeated the questions. And I'll do that with my students if I do vocabulary words. Maybe I have atmosphere twice. And they still rotate, but then they stop. They don't go to all of the posters. Maybe I'll have a big circle. I could have done it that way too.
It's like she did this 3 times. Like, you remember the 5 posters we had? We did 2 sets of 5, let's say. And then this group rotated those, and this group rotated over here. So that's how so you can keep your groups small.
And you can tape the poster on the wall around the room, so you can write on the wall. And that way, and then you can push all the desks in the middle so they have room to walk around the room. I know it's a little difficult. I do it a lot. I do it a lot with 2s or 3s, but my classes are smaller. But we had groups of 4 or 5, or at least 4 on Monday. Yeah. So, I mean, it's doable, but like I said, it might be a little crazy, especially the first time. But then if I ask the teachers to do it again, they know the routine. They understand the activity, and we practice it. So any other feedback or questions?
I have one question for you. Yeah, I remember the first activity you done is what is in the bag? And I think the question is related to your topic because you are going to teach your students atmosphere and air. And if we want to, how can we make such a question to warm up, to make my students think? I think it is a little difficult because in Taiwan, English teachers, we don't really teach something. We just teach the language. So I think, can you teach us how to make questions? Because I think this is interesting because you let them think about what is in the back, but I don't think we can use this in all of our English classrooms. So I think, so do you have other strategies to share with us?
Does anyone have an idea before I answer? Does anyone have an idea to help her? Like a good idea for a warm-up. That's before you begin is a way to warm up the students. I see you have warm-ups in your books. If I'm talking about transportation that day, I'm going to warm up my class before we start the lesson. What are examples of ways you use transportation? Or tell me all of the words you already know in English about transportation, just to get them thinking about the topic. Or Mother's Day. You know, how did you celebrate Mother's Day last year? Or what are other holidays that you enjoy? I don't know, something similar to the topic, just to get their brains warmed up about whatever your theme is for the day. It's always good to have a hands-on, right? Like, even I was teaching cause and effect one day in a sample lesson in graduate school, and I brought a cup of water, and I spilled the water on the table, and I said, "Oh my God!" And you know, it's like my hook. They call it, you know, the hook to your lesson. You need to get their attention right away. So I spilled water, and I said, "Well, what happened?" They said, "Well, there's water on the table." I said, "Well, how did that happen?" "Well, you pushed over the glass of water." "Oh, okay. So what would you say the cause is, or what is the effect?" And we started talking about cause and effect. So that was like an English language arts lesson. You could bring in a bus and be like, "What is this? How do we use it?" You know, bring in a little model toy.
And we were doing a writing assignment, so mine is a little challenging because I teach language arts like many of you. And so I wanted them to start writing with details. And I wanted them to start thinking about fact and opinion. Okay? So I brought in an artifact, something from one of my travels. I'll have a lot from this trip so that I can share. And I just held something up. I said, "What is this?" And then everyone guessed what it was. Some people didn't know what it was. I said, "Where did it come from?" I said, "What questions would you ask me if you want to know what this is?" They said, "Well, where did you get it? Why did you buy it? Who bought it? How much did it cost? Where did you get it? What is it used for?" Just to get them thinking, whatever it is. So you can always bring in something. It depends. So mine was more not transportation or clothing. It was to get them prepared to write and start thinking about details and the questions that the reader might have when they're writing. So you just have to be creative.
Bring in a Mother's Day card.
Yes.
Yeah. What is this? What does it represent? When do you use it? When do you give it? Who gives it to who? I don't know. Questions. Any other questions or feedback? Okay. So I said today, summarize. I want you to summarize your experience in this workshop. It was 3 days. This was from Monday.
It was.
In one word. So the 3 days, I want you to summarize in one word. And you're going to write your word on the Post-it.
One word. One word to describe your experience.
Not two, just one. Everybody have one word on their Post-it? Yeah? Okay. Now you're going to work in groups of 4 or 5. Yeah? Okay. And as a group, combine your words to make one sentence. So all of the Post-its should go on that poster on the back side. Put the words together in one sentence.
You can add other words, like if you need to connect the words.
Yeah. So you can add you can add words to the sentence. Add words is okay.
Commas, punctuation.
Okay. You're gonna write it down on that poster. You can add words. So the something.
Useful, helpful.
Are we ready? Ready, spaghetti? I say that a lot. When my students tease me and they make fun of me, they always say, "We school, ready spaghetti, ready spaghetti." I'm like, oh, whatever. Okay, so you're going to share your sentence with the group, okay?
The teachers are really interesting and fun, who give us many fresh ideas which are helpful and fantastic.
cooperative learning is useful, helpful, engaging, and of course, fabulous.
Cooperative learning is useful and helpful for our students to boost their creativity and gain glorious learning experience.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope that there were at least some ideas you can take away and use in your classroom. And remember, there are more ideas on this worksheet. If you want to see what it looks like, if you go on YouTube and you look up Gallery Walk, Kagan, Cooperative Learning Gallery Walk, or something like that, there are many videos I've found on YouTube of students practicing these activities. If anyone's interested, I put our contact information on this slide. If you need our email address or anything, I did give Ivy a copy of the PowerPoint, so I hope she can share that with you all. Yeah, it's an electronic, it's email and a text. Yeah, the whole PowerPoint from the whole 3 days is in the email that I sent to Ivy. So thank you again so much for having us. We have a good time meeting and spending time with you all. Did anyone have any last comments or feedback or any questions about anything? Okay. And see, this is another way you can end a lesson doing something like this with your students also. So another way to practice. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's give Helen and Claudia a big hand again. Thank you for coming a long way from USA to here, just for sharing your teaching experience with us. We hope that you will have a great time during your trip in Taiwan and also in mainland China. Yeah, and because I think everybody's hungry right now. So yeah, we finished earlier today. So let's have our lunch together, okay? Thank you.